Question 1. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential for a new pathogen to be present in a recently developed product line at a Tyson Foods facility, with preliminary testing showing results that are borderline but concerning. Management is under pressure to meet aggressive production targets and launch the product to capture market share. What is the most appropriate course of action from a stakeholder perspective, considering U.S. regulatory frameworks and ethical obligations? Option A. Immediately halt production of the product line, conduct comprehensive confirmatory testing, and engage with the Food and Drug Administration (FDA) to determine the appropriate next steps, even if this delays the product launch and incurs additional costs. Option B. Conduct internal testing only and, if results remain inconclusive, release the product while discreetly informing key distribution partners about the potential but unconfirmed risk. Option C. Proceed with the product launch as scheduled, assuming the borderline results are within acceptable margins of error, and monitor consumer feedback for any adverse reactions. Option D. Implement minor adjustments to the current sanitation protocols and continue production, relying on the existing quality control measures to catch any significant issues. Correct answer is A. Immediately halt production of the product line, conduct comprehensive confirmatory testing, and engage with the Food and Drug Administration (FDA) to determine the appropriate next steps, even if this delays the product launch and incurs additional costs. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the immediate financial pressures of a business with its long-term ethical and legal obligations to its stakeholders, particularly concerning food safety and public health. The pressure to reduce costs can create a conflict of interest, where short-term gains might be prioritized over critical safety protocols. This requires careful judgment to ensure that all decisions align with regulatory requirements and ethical standards, even when faced with financial constraints. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and transparent engagement with regulatory bodies and a commitment to upholding food safety standards, even if it incurs additional costs. This aligns with the principles of corporate social responsibility and the regulatory framework governing food production in the U.S., such as the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA. FSMA places a strong emphasis on preventing foodborne illnesses rather than just reacting to them. By investing in enhanced testing and potentially delaying product release, Tyson Foods demonstrates a commitment to consumer safety and regulatory compliance, which builds trust with consumers, regulators, and investors. This approach mitigates the risk of costly recalls, lawsuits, and reputational damage, ultimately serving the long-term interests of all stakeholders. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves downplaying the significance of the test results and proceeding with the product release without further investigation. This directly violates the spirit and letter of food safety regulations, which mandate that companies take all necessary steps to ensure their products are safe for consumption. Such an action could lead to severe regulatory penalties, including fines and operational shutdown, and would undoubtedly result in significant reputational damage and loss of consumer trust. Ethically, it represents a failure to uphold the duty of care owed to the public. Another incorrect approach is to implement superficial corrective actions that do not address the root cause of the potential contamination. This might involve minor adjustments to existing processes without a thorough review or investment in more robust preventative measures. While it might appear to be a cost-saving measure, it fails to adequately mitigate the risk and leaves the company vulnerable to future incidents. This approach is a form of regulatory noncompliance, as it does not demonstrate a good faith effort to achieve the safety objectives mandated by law. It also fails to address the concerns of stakeholders who rely on the company to produce safe food. A third incorrect approach is to conceal the test results from regulatory authorities and internal stakeholders. This is not only unethical but also illegal. Transparency with regulators is a cornerstone of the U.S. food safety system. Concealing information can lead to criminal charges, severe fines, and imprisonment for responsible individuals. It erodes any trust that may exist and creates a significant liability for the company. Ethically, it is a betrayal of public trust and a dereliction of duty. Professional reasoning. Professionals in the food industry must adopt a risk-based decision-making framework that prioritizes public health and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding the regulatory landscape and its implications for operations. 2. conducting comprehensive risk assessments that consider potential hazards and their impact on stakeholders. 3. Fostering a culture of transparency and accountability, where safety concerns are raised and addressed without fear of reprisal. 4. Engaging in proactive communication with regulatory bodies and stakeholders. 5. Investing in robust food safety systems and continuous improvement. When faced with conflicting pressures, professionals should always err on the side of caution and prioritize actions that uphold ethical standards and legal obligations, recognizing that long-term sustainability is built on a foundation of trust and safety. Question 2. Which approach would be most effective for Tyson Foods in managing its diverse stakeholder relationships and ensuring long-term business sustainability, considering U.S. regulatory frameworks and ethical expectations? Option A. A stakeholder-centric approach that integrates environmental, social, and governance factors into strategic decision-making and operational practices. Option B. A shareholder primacy approach focused exclusively on maximizing short-term financial returns, with compliance as a secondary consideration. Option C. A reactive approach that addresses stakeholder concerns and regulatory issues only when formal complaints or enforcement actions arise. Option D. A minimalist approach that adheres strictly to the letter of U.S. regulations without proactively considering broader stakeholder impacts or ethical implications. The correct answer is A. A stakeholder-centric approach that integrates environmental, social, and governance factors into strategic decision-making and operational practices. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate financial interests of shareholders with the long-term sustainability and ethical considerations of the company's operations, particularly concerning its impact on the environment and local communities. Tyson Foods, as a large agricultural producer, faces scrutiny regarding its environmental footprint and labor practices. Navigating these competing demands requires careful judgment to ensure compliance with relevant U.S. regulations and ethical stakeholder management. Correct approach analysis. Adopting a stakeholder perspective that prioritizes long-term value creation by integrating environmental, social, and governance factors into business strategy represents best professional practice. This approach aligns with evolving regulatory expectations and investor demands for corporate responsibility. For instance, the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, increasingly expects disclosures related to climate-related risks and human capital management, which are core ESG components. By proactively addressing these issues, Tyson Foods can mitigate regulatory risks, enhance its reputation, and build stronger relationships with all stakeholders, ultimately contributing to sustainable profitability. This aligns with principles of corporate social responsibility and good corporate governance, which are implicitly encouraged by regulatory frameworks aiming for fair and transparent markets. Incorrect approaches analysis. Focusing solely on maximizing short-term shareholder profits without considering other stakeholders' interests can lead to regulatory noncompliance and ethical breaches. For example, neglecting environmental regulations to cut costs could result in fines, legal challenges, and reputational damage, violating the Clean Air Act or Clean Water Act. Similarly, ignoring worker safety and fair labor practices could lead to violations of the Occupational Safety and Health Act (OSHA) or Fair Labor Standards Act (FLSA), resulting in penalties and loss of public trust. Prioritizing only regulatory compliance without considering broader stakeholder impacts is also insufficient. While adherence to minimum legal standards is essential, it does not guarantee ethical conduct or long-term business success. A company might technically comply with environmental permits, but still engage in practices that harm local ecosystems or communities, leading to public backlash and potential future regulatory tightening. This approach fails to proactively manage risks and build positive stakeholder relationships. Adopting a purely reactive approach, addressing stakeholder concerns only when prompted by regulatory action or public outcry, is professionally unsound. This often leads to costly remediation, damage control, and a perception of unwillingness to operate responsibly. It misses opportunities to innovate, build trust, and gain a competitive advantage through proactive ESG integration, and can be seen as a failure to uphold the spirit of regulations designed to promote responsible corporate citizenship. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all relevant stakeholders and understanding their interests and concerns. This involves a thorough assessment of current and potential regulatory requirements, ethical standards, and market expectations. The next step is to evaluate how different strategic approaches impact these stakeholders and the company's ability to operate sustainably and ethically. The chosen approach should aim to create shared value, where business success is intertwined with positive societal and environmental outcomes, thereby mitigating risks and fostering long-term resilience. This proactive and integrated approach ensures alignment with both legal obligations and broader ethical responsibilities. Question 3. The review process indicates a pattern of missed deadlines and quality concerns regarding a project managed by a long-term colleague with whom you have a friendly working relationship. You are responsible for evaluating their performance and determining appropriate next steps. Which of the following represents the most professional and ethically sound approach? Option A. Address the performance issues directly with the colleague in a private conversation, expressing disappointment and suggesting they try harder to meet expectations, without formal documentation or further investigation. Option B. Discuss the performance concerns with other colleagues to gauge their opinions and potentially build consensus on how to address the situation before speaking with the individual directly. Option C. Immediately initiate a formal performance improvement plan with severe consequences, given the impact on project timelines, without first discussing the specific issues or offering support. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the colleague's performance against established project metrics and company policies, documenting all findings, and then engage in a constructive feedback session to discuss areas for improvement and potential support, before considering further disciplinary action if improvements are not observed. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough review of the colleague's performance against established project metrics and company policies, documenting all findings, and then engage in a constructive feedback session to discuss areas for improvement and potential support, before considering further disciplinary action if improvements are not observed. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate a situation where personal relationships might influence objective decision-making. The core difficulty lies in maintaining impartiality and adhering to company policy when a close colleague is involved in a performance issue. This demands a robust decision-making framework that prioritizes fairness, evidence, and established procedures over personal bias. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, evidence-based process that aligns with best professional practices and regulatory expectations for fair employment. This approach prioritizes objective assessment of performance against established metrics and company policies. It ensures that any disciplinary action is well documented, consistent, and defensible, thereby mitigating legal and ethical risks. This aligns with the principles of due process and equal treatment, which are fundamental in employment law and ethical conduct. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to overlook the performance issues due to the personal friendship. This fails to uphold professional responsibility and company policy, potentially leading to a decline in team productivity and morale. Ethically, it is a breach of fairness to other employees who are held to different standards. Legally, it could expose the company to claims of favoritism or discrimination if other employees are disciplined for similar infractions. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately escalate to severe disciplinary action without a thorough investigation or prior attempts at performance improvement. This demonstrates a lack of empathy and a failure to follow a progressive disciplinary process, which is often a requirement under employment law and company policy. It can lead to wrongful termination claims and damage the employer's reputation. A third incorrect approach would be to delegate the entire decision-making process to another manager without providing clear guidance or oversight. While delegation can be a tool, abdicating responsibility for a critical decision, especially one involving a direct report and potential disciplinary action, is unprofessional and can lead to inconsistent application of policies. It also bypasses the opportunity for the individual to develop their own judgment and decision-making skills. Professional reasoning. Professionals should utilize a decision-making framework that emphasizes objectivity, fairness, and adherence to established policies and procedures. This typically involves 1. Gathering all relevant facts and evidence objectively. 2. Consulting company policies and relevant regulations. 3. Evaluating the situation against established performance standards. 4. Considering potential biases and taking steps to mitigate them. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen course of action. 6. Seeking guidance from HR or legal counsel when necessary. Question 4. Upon reviewing an email request from a colleague in another department for access to a shared drive folder containing employee performance review summaries, which of the following actions best demonstrates adherence to best practices for data handling and confidentiality within a U.S.-regulated corporate environment? Option A. Immediately forwarding the colleague's request to the Human Resources Department and the company's legal counsel for guidance on appropriate data access and disclosure protocols. Option B. Accessing the shared drive folder to review the performance summaries and then forwarding relevant, anonymized data points to the requesting colleague. Option C. Informing the colleague that you cannot provide access to performance review summaries due to confidentiality concerns and suggesting they contact HR directly. Option D. Directly accessing the shared drive folder and providing the colleague with a link to the folder, assuming they have a legitimate business need. Correct answer is B. Accessing the shared drive folder to review the performance summaries and then forwarding relevant, anonymized data points to the requesting colleague. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect confidential data. The challenge lies in discerning when and how to access information that might be sensitive, ensuring that such access is both legitimate and compliant with internal policies and external regulations. Careful judgment is required to avoid any appearance of impropriety or actual breaches of confidentiality. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to established protocols and legal frameworks. By seeking clarification from the appropriate authority, e.g., legal counsel or compliance department, before accessing potentially sensitive information, an individual demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This proactive step ensures that any information accessed is done so legitimately, minimizing the risk of data misuse or violation of privacy laws. It aligns with the principle of need to know and the broader duty of care expected of employees handling sensitive company information. An incorrect approach that involves directly accessing the shared drive without authorization or further inquiry fails to uphold professional standards. This action could be a violation of data privacy regulations, such as those governing employee or customer information, and would likely contravene internal company policies on data access and confidentiality. It bypasses necessary checks and balances designed to prevent unauthorized disclosure or use of sensitive information, potentially leading to legal repercussions for the individual and the company. Another incorrect approach, such as discussing the sensitive information with colleagues who do not have a legitimate need to know, constitutes a breach of confidentiality. This action directly violates ethical obligations and potentially specific data protection laws, as it exposes sensitive information to individuals not authorized to receive it. This can lead to reputational damage and legal penalties. A further incorrect approach, such as ignoring the request for information due to fear of overstepping boundaries, is also professionally deficient. While caution is warranted, outright inaction can hinder legitimate business operations and may even be seen as a failure to perform duties. The professional decision-making process should involve a clear understanding of company policies, relevant regulations, and the principle of seeking guidance when in doubt. This framework involves 1. Identifying the nature of the information requested and its potential sensitivity. 2. Consulting internal policies and procedures regarding data access and confidentiality. 3. If ambiguity exists or the information appears sensitive, seeking clarification from the designated authority, e.g., supervisor, legal compliance. 4. Acting only after receiving clear authorization and guidance, ensuring all actions are documented and compliant. Question 5. The investigation demonstrates that a specific department within Tyson Foods may be engaging in practices that could violate food safety reporting regulations. To understand the scope of this potential violation, the compliance team needs to review internal communications. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for information with regulatory and ethical obligations? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review of all electronic communications within the identified department, including emails, instant messages, and shared drive activity, without prior employee notification. Option B. Develop a narrowly tailored request for specific keywords and date ranges related to food safety reporting within the department's communication logs, seeking legal counsel for authorization and guidance on data anonymization, where appropriate. Option C. Rely on informal conversations with senior management in the department to gauge the severity of the issue and assume that any reporting discrepancies are minor administrative errors. Option D. Immediately halt all operations in the department and initiate a broad internal audit of all employees' personal and professional digital footprints to identify any potential wrongdoing. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive review of all electronic communications within the identified department, including emails, instant messages, and shared drive activity, without prior employee notification. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for information to address a potential compliance issue with the obligation to protect employee privacy and adhere to data handling regulations. A hasty or overly broad approach could lead to significant legal and ethical breaches. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a targeted and legally compliant investigation. By focusing on specific, relevant data points and ensuring proper authorization and anonymization where possible, the company upholds its commitment to regulatory compliance, e.g., data privacy laws like the GDPR if applicable, or similar U.S. state-level privacy regulations, and ethical treatment of employees. This approach minimizes the risk of overreach and ensures that any findings are obtained through legitimate and defensible means. An incorrect approach that involves a broad, indiscriminate collection of employee communications would fail to respect privacy rights and could violate data protection laws. This could lead to significant fines, reputational damage, and legal challenges. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the potential issue due to fear of overreach, is a failure of due diligence and could result in the company being found non-compliant with its own internal policies or external regulations if the issue is indeed a serious one. A third incorrect approach, which is to rely solely on anecdotal evidence without proper investigation, demonstrates a lack of commitment to factual accuracy and can lead to misinformed decisions, potentially harming innocent employees or failing to address the actual compliance risk. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the specific compliance concern. This should be followed by consulting relevant internal policies and external regulations to understand the legal boundaries for investigation. Next, they should design a narrowly tailored investigation plan that seeks only the necessary information, considering less intrusive methods first. Obtaining appropriate authorization before proceeding and ensuring data is handled securely and confidentially are crucial steps. Finally, a review of findings should be conducted to ensure they are directly related to the initial compliance concern. Question 6. Governance review demonstrates that a new, unproven cleaning agent is being used in a production area to expedite the cleaning process, despite some employees reporting mild respiratory irritation. The supervisor, under pressure to meet a tight production deadline, is considering continuing its use without further investigation or consultation with the safety department. Option A. Inform the production team to use the new cleaning agent with caution and to report any severe reactions, but proceed with the expedited cleaning schedule. Option B. Halt the use of the new cleaning agent immediately, consult the safety department and relevant regulatory guidelines, e.g., OSHA standards for chemical exposure, and await their assessment before resuming use. Option C. Continue using the new cleaning agent as planned, assuming the reported irritations are minor and will resolve on their own to ensure production targets are met. Option D. Discreetly switch back to the old cleaning agent without informing anyone about the new agent or the reported irritations, to avoid disrupting the production schedule. The correct answer is B. Halt the use of the new cleaning agent immediately, consult the safety department and relevant regulatory guidelines, e.g., OSHA standards for chemical exposure, and await their assessment before resuming use. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term ethical and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet production targets can tempt individuals to overlook or downplay potential risks, especially when those risks are not immediately apparent or directly tied to a quantifiable financial loss. The core of the challenge lies in applying a robust decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and adherence to established guidelines over expediency. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it involves a systematic evaluation of the situation, considering all relevant stakeholders and potential consequences. It prioritizes seeking clarification and adhering to established protocols, even when it might cause a temporary delay. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and ethical decision-making, which emphasize transparency, accountability, and the avoidance of actions that could lead to regulatory scrutiny or reputational damage. Specifically, in a U.S. context, this would involve adhering to OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, guidelines and internal company policies designed to ensure worker safety and prevent environmental hazards. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate production over safety concerns would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to violations of OSHA standards, resulting in fines, legal action, and potential harm to employees. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for employee well-being and a failure to uphold the company's responsibility to provide a safe working environment. Another incorrect approach, such as assuming the issue is minor without proper investigation, bypasses due diligence and could lead to unforeseen and more serious problems down the line. Violating the principle of proactive risk management, professionals should employ a decision-making framework that includes 1. Identifying the core issue and potential risks. 2. Consulting relevant policies, regulations, and subject matter experts. 3. Evaluating the potential consequences of different courses of action, considering both short-term and long-term impacts. 4. Selecting the option that best aligns with ethical principles and regulatory requirements, even if it requires additional time or resources. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen course of action. Question 7. During the evaluation of a new production line efficiency initiative at a Tyson Foods facility, a supervisor identifies a potential shortcut that could significantly increase output but may also introduce minor, yet unquantified, risks to worker ergonomics and material handling safety. The supervisor is under pressure to meet ambitious quarterly targets. Option A. Proceed with the shortcut but instruct workers to be extra cautious, assuming they will adapt to any new ergonomic challenges without formal assessment or training. Option B. Implement the shortcut immediately to maximize output and address any potential safety concerns reactively if they arise, prioritizing the achievement of production targets. Option C. Delay the decision until after the quarterly targets are met, then revisit the efficiency initiative with a focus on safety, accepting the missed opportunity for immediate output gains. Option D. Halt the implementation of the shortcut and initiate a formal risk assessment process, involving the safety department and consulting relevant OSHA guidelines and internal company safety protocols before any decision is made. The correct answer is B. Implement the shortcut immediately to maximize output and address any potential safety concerns reactively if they arise, prioritizing the achievement of production targets. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term ethical considerations and potential regulatory compliance issues. The decision-maker must navigate conflicting pressures, such as meeting production targets versus ensuring fair and safe working conditions, all while operating within the specific legal and ethical framework applicable to Tyson Foods operations in the United States. The correct approach emphasizes a structured, data-driven, and ethically grounded decision-making process. It involves gathering all relevant facts, consulting applicable company policies and regulations, such as OSHA standards for workplace safety, Fair Labor Standards Act for wage and hour issues, and any internal Tyson ethical guidelines, and considering the potential impact on all stakeholders, including employees, the company, and the public. This approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes compliance, minimizes risk, and upholds the company's commitment to responsible operations. It aligns with the principles of due diligence and ethical leadership expected in the food industry. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost savings without considering safety implications would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. For instance, Ignoring potential hazards to speed up production could violate OSHA General Duty Clause, which requires employers to provide a workplace free from recognized hazards. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes meeting a deadline at the expense of proper documentation or verification of compliance could lead to violations of record-keeping requirements or misrepresentation to regulatory bodies. Such actions not only expose the company to legal penalties and reputational damage, but also demonstrate a disregard for employee well-being and ethical business conduct. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that includes identifying the core issue, gathering objective information, identifying all relevant stakeholders and their interests, evaluating potential courses of action against ethical principles and regulatory requirements, consulting with relevant experts, legal, HR, safety, making a reasoned decision, and documenting the process and rationale. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are not only effective, but also responsible and compliant. Question 8. Compliance review shows that a production line supervisor has instructed a team to bypass a standard quality control check to meet an urgent delivery deadline. The team member is aware that this check is in place to ensure adherence to specific U.S. food safety regulations. What is the most appropriate course of action for the team member? Option A. Bypass the quality control check, but make a note of the deviation in the production log, hoping that this documentation will mitigate any future issues. Option B. Proceed with bypassing the quality control check as instructed by the supervisor to avoid delaying the delivery, assuming the risk is minimal for a single instance. Option C. Directly question the supervisor's authority to waive established quality control procedures and refuse to comply without further clarification from a higher authority. Option D. Politely refuse to bypass the quality control check and immediately escalate the concern to their direct manager and the compliance department, citing the potential violation of U.S. food safety regulations. The correct answer is D. Politely refuse to bypass the quality control check and immediately escalate the concern to their direct manager and the compliance department, citing the potential violation of U.S. food safety regulations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term compliance and ethical considerations. The pressure to meet production targets can lead to shortcuts that violate established procedures and potentially regulatory requirements. The decision-maker must assess the risk of non-compliance against the perceived benefit of expediency. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic evaluation of the situation against established policies and regulations. This means pausing the process, gathering all relevant information, consulting with the appropriate compliance or legal department, and making a decision based on a thorough understanding of the potential consequences. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing adherence to the Tyson Foods Code of Conduct and any applicable U.S. federal or state regulations governing food safety and labor practices. It demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and risk mitigation, ensuring that operational decisions do not compromise the company's integrity or legal standing. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the deviation without proper authorization or consultation. This is a direct violation of internal control procedures and potentially U.S. labor laws or food safety regulations if the deviation impacts quality or safety. It demonstrates a disregard for established protocols and a failure to exercise due diligence, creating significant legal and reputational risk for Tyson Foods. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the supervisor's directive without independent verification or consideration of the broader implications. This abdicates personal responsibility and can perpetuate a culture of non-compliance. It fails to uphold the ethical obligation to act in the best interest of the company and its stakeholders, potentially leading to violations of worker safety regulations or food handling standards. A third incorrect approach is to assume that the deviation is minor and therefore inconsequential. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the interconnectedness of operational processes and regulatory requirements. Even seemingly small deviations can have cascading effects, leading to significant compliance issues, product recalls, or legal penalties under U.S. food safety laws like the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA, or labor laws. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such dilemmas should employ a structured decision-making framework. This typically involves 1. Identifying the problem and its immediate impact. 2. Gathering all relevant facts, including company policies and applicable regulations. 3. Identifying stakeholders and their interests. 4. Evaluating alternative courses of action, considering their ethical and regulatory implications. 5. Selecting the best course of action based on a risk-benefit analysis that prioritizes compliance and ethical conduct. 6. Implementing the decision and monitoring its outcomes. In this context, consulting with the compliance department or legal counsel is a critical step before making any decision that deviates from established procedures. Question 9. Compliance review shows a production supervisor has proposed a modification to a standard operating procedure for a new product line, stating it will significantly increase efficiency. The supervisor assures that the change is minor and poses no risk to product quality or safety, but has not provided any documentation or sought formal approval from the quality assurance or regulatory compliance departments. What is the most appropriate course of action for the manager receiving this proposal? Option A. Initiate a formal review process for the proposed procedural modification, involving relevant departments like quality assurance and regulatory compliance, to assess its impact on product safety, quality, and adherence to all applicable regulations before any implementation. Option B. Delegate the decision to the production supervisor, trusting their judgment and experience to implement the change if they deem it appropriate for operational efficiency. Option C. Reject the proposed modification outright, as any deviation from established standard operating procedures requires formal approval and cannot be considered without a complete, pre-approved documentation package. Option D. Immediately approve the procedural modification based on the supervisor's assurance of efficiency gains and lack of perceived risk to support the production team's efforts to meet targets. The correct answer is A. Initiate a formal review process for the proposed procedural modification, involving relevant departments like quality assurance and regulatory compliance, to assess its impact on product safety, quality, and adherence to all applicable regulations before any implementation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term ethical and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet production targets can create a temptation to overlook potential risks or bypass established procedures. The decision-maker must exercise sound judgment to avoid compromising the company's integrity and legal standing. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic evaluation of the proposed change against established company policies, regulatory requirements, and ethical considerations. This includes consulting with relevant departments, e.g., legal, compliance, quality assurance, to ensure all potential impacts are understood and addressed. This method represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, risk-based decision-making process, aligning with the principles of due diligence and responsible corporate governance. It ensures that operational decisions are made with a comprehensive understanding of their implications, thereby safeguarding the company from legal penalties, reputational damage, and ethical breaches. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately approving the change based on the supervisor's assurance without further verification. This fails to uphold the principle of independent verification and due diligence. It creates a significant regulatory risk by potentially allowing non-compliant practices to be implemented, violating the spirit and letter of food safety regulations. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of commitment to rigorous oversight and could foster a culture where shortcuts are accepted. Another incorrect approach is to reject the change outright without a proper assessment, solely due to the deviation from standard procedure. A caution is necessary. A rigid refusal without understanding the context or potential benefits of a modified process can stifle innovation and operational efficiency. This approach might lead to missed opportunities for improvement and could be perceived as bureaucratic, potentially undermining morale without a clear justification based on risk. A third incorrect approach is to delegate the decision entirely to the supervisor without providing clear guidance or oversight. This abdication of responsibility is a serious ethical and regulatory failure. It allows for potential bias or incomplete risk assessment by an individual who may not have the full picture or the necessary expertise in compliance. This practice is contrary to established corporate governance principles that require clear lines of accountability and oversight for significant operational decisions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the problem or proposed change. This is followed by gathering all relevant information, including operational requirements, policy guidelines, and regulatory mandates. Next, potential risks and benefits are assessed, often through consultation with subject matter experts. The decision is then made based on this comprehensive analysis, with clear documentation of the rationale. Finally, the decision is implemented and monitored for effectiveness and compliance. This iterative process ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with organizational values and legal obligations. Question 10. Regulatory review indicates that Tyson Foods is considering implementing a new, cost-effective waste management technology to improve operational efficiency at one of its processing plants. However, the proposed technology has not been widely adopted in the industry, and its long-term environmental implications, particularly concerning potential water discharge and waste byproduct disposal, are not fully understood. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with environmental regulations and responsible corporate practice? Option A. Implement the technology on a trial basis in a limited area of the plant to gauge its operational performance, deferring a full environmental review until the trial period concludes. Option B. Proceed with the immediate implementation of the new technology, assuming it meets basic operational requirements, and address any potential environmental issues that arise post-implementation. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive environmental impact assessment (IA) to evaluate the technology's potential effects on water quality, air emissions, and waste disposal, and develop mitigation strategies before implementation. Option D. Rely solely on the vendor's claims and certifications regarding the technology's environmental safety, without conducting independent verification or further assessment. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the immediate implementation of the new technology, assuming it meets basic operational requirements, and address any potential environmental issues that arise post-implementation. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term implications of environmental impact and regulatory compliance. Tyson Foods, as a major player in the food industry, faces significant scrutiny regarding its environmental footprint. A hasty decision without a thorough impact assessment could lead to substantial regulatory fines, reputational damage, and potential operational disruptions if environmental concerns are not adequately addressed. The correct approach: conducting a comprehensive environmental impact assessment (IA) before implementing new waste management technologies, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of responsible corporate citizenship and adherence to environmental regulations, such as those enforced by the Environmental Protection Agency (EPA) in the United States. An EIA systematically identifies potential environmental effects, evaluates their significance, and proposes mitigation measures. This proactive approach ensures that the chosen technology is not only efficient but also environmentally sound, minimizing risks of non-compliance with the Clean Water Act, Resource Conservation and Recovery Act (RCRA), and other relevant environmental statutes. It also demonstrates a commitment to sustainability, which is increasingly important to consumers and investors. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize cost savings and operational speed over environmental due diligence. For instance, immediately adopting a new waste disposal system solely based on its lower upfront cost, without assessing its potential to release pollutants into waterways or generate hazardous waste, would be a significant regulatory failure. This could lead to violations of the Clean Water Act, resulting in substantial penalties and mandated remediation efforts. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on anecdotal evidence or the vendor's assurances without independent verification. This bypasses the rigorous data collection and analysis required by regulatory bodies and could result in the selection of a technology that, while seemingly efficient, has unforeseen negative environmental consequences, violating principles of due diligence and potentially leading to non-compliance with RCRA if hazardous waste is mishandled. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core business objective, e.g., improving waste management efficiency. This should be followed by a thorough understanding of the relevant regulatory landscape. Next, a risk assessment should be performed, considering both operational and environmental risks. The EIA process is a critical component of this risk assessment, providing the data needed to make an informed decision. Finally, the decision should be made based on a holistic evaluation of cost, efficiency, environmental impact, and regulatory compliance, ensuring that the chosen solution aligns with both business goals and legal obligations. Question 11. Market research demonstrates a significant and accelerating shift in consumer preferences towards plant-based protein alternatives, potentially impacting the demand for traditional meat products. Tyson Foods is considering a strategic response to this trend. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory expectations for a publicly traded U.S. company in assessing and responding to this market development? Option A. Immediately initiate aggressive cost-cutting measures across the traditional meat production division to offset anticipated revenue declines, without a detailed analysis of long-term market implications. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes the potential financial, operational, and reputational effects of the consumer shift, develops mitigation strategies for identified risks, and informs necessary disclosures to investors. Option C. Share preliminary findings and potential strategic adjustments only with a select group of long-term investors to gauge their reaction before a broader announcement. Option D. Focus on marketing campaigns emphasizing the benefits of traditional meat products, while downplaying or ignoring the growing consumer interest in plant-based alternatives. Correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes the potential financial, operational, and reputational effects of the consumer shift, develops mitigation strategies for identified risks, and informs necessary disclosures to investors. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Tyson Foods, as a publicly traded company operating within the United States, is subject to stringent regulations regarding its financial reporting and the impact of its business decisions on stakeholders. The core of the challenge lies in accurately assessing and communicating the potential financial and operational ramifications of a significant market shift, such as a widespread consumer preference change towards plant-based alternatives. This requires a nuanced understanding of both market dynamics and regulatory expectations for disclosure and risk management. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it involves a comprehensive and systematic impact assessment that aligns with the principles of sound corporate governance and regulatory compliance under U.S. securities laws, such as those enforced by the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. This approach prioritizes identifying, quantifying, and mitigating potential risks and opportunities. It also ensures that the company's disclosures to investors and the public are accurate, complete, and timely, thereby fulfilling fiduciary duties and maintaining market confidence. This proactive stance is crucial for demonstrating responsible management and adherence to the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, SOX, requirements for internal controls over financial reporting. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost-cutting, without a thorough impact assessment, would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This would violate the spirit and letter of SEC regulations, requiring companies to disclose material risks and uncertainties that could affect their financial performance. Such a narrow focus could lead to underestimating the long-term consequences, such as loss of market share, brand damage, and potential litigation, all of which would need to be disclosed if material. Another incorrect approach, which involves selectively sharing information with certain stakeholders while withholding it from others, would constitute a violation of fair disclosure principles and potentially insider trading regulations, undermining the integrity of the capital markets. Furthermore, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence rather than rigorous data analysis would fail to meet the standards of due diligence expected of public companies and could lead to flawed strategic decisions, exposing the company to regulatory scrutiny and shareholder lawsuits. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This begins with identifying potential market shifts and their plausible impacts. Next, it requires gathering relevant data, both quantitative and qualitative, to analyze the magnitude and likelihood of these impacts. This analysis should then inform strategic responses, including mitigation plans for negative impacts and strategies to capitalize on opportunities. Crucially, all material findings and their potential financial implications must be documented and communicated internally to relevant decision-makers and externally to stakeholders in accordance with regulatory requirements. This process ensures that decisions are informed, compliant, and aligned with the company's long-term sustainability and shareholder value. Question 12. Benchmark analysis indicates that Tyson Foods is considering significant operational changes in its processing plants. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates a responsible and proactive strategy for managing the potential consequences of these changes? Option A. Focusing exclusively on the immediate financial gains of the operational changes, without considering broader societal or environmental implications. Option B. Proceeding with the operational changes based on projected cost savings, assuming any negative consequences will be minimal and self-resolving. Option C. Conducting a thorough impact assessment that evaluates potential effects on employees, local communities, and the environment, and developing mitigation strategies. Option D. Relying solely on external consultants to conduct a superficial review of potential impacts, without significant internal engagement or oversight. The correct answer is C. Conducting a thorough impact assessment that evaluates potential effects on employees, local communities, and the environment, and developing mitigation strategies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of how Tyson Foods' operational changes might impact its workforce and the broader community, necessitating a proactive and responsible approach to managing potential negative consequences. The challenge lies in anticipating and mitigating these impacts before they become significant problems, which demands foresight and a commitment to ethical business practices beyond mere compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive impact assessment that considers both direct and indirect effects on employees, local community, and the environment. This aligns with best professional practices by demonstrating a commitment to corporate social responsibility and stakeholder well-being. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this proactive assessment helps identify potential violations of labor laws, environmental regulations, or ethical guidelines before they occur, allowing for timely corrective actions and fostering a positive corporate reputation. It embodies a principle of responsible business conduct, anticipating and addressing potential harm rather than reacting to it. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely focus on the immediate financial benefits of the operational changes without considering their broader implications. This represents a failure to adhere to ethical business principles that extend beyond profit maximization to include the welfare of stakeholders and the environment. It could lead to regulatory scrutiny if the unaddressed impacts violate labor standards, environmental protections, or community engagement expectations. Another incorrect approach is to assume that any negative impacts will be minor and self-correcting. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for potential systemic issues. Ethically, it is irresponsible to ignore potential harm to employees or communities. From a regulatory perspective, such an assumption could lead to unforeseen noncompliance with various statutes and regulations designed to protect workers and the public. A third incorrect approach is to delegate the responsibility for assessing impacts entirely to external consultants without internal oversight or engagement. While consultants can provide expertise, a complete abdication of internal responsibility suggests a lack of commitment to understanding and managing the consequences of the company's actions. This can lead to a superficial assessment that misses critical nuances relevant to Tyson Foods' specific operational context and may not fully align with the company's ethical commitments or regulatory obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a framework that prioritizes proactive risk identification and mitigation. This involves a systematic process of identifying potential impacts, assessing their likelihood and severity, and developing strategies to prevent or minimize negative outcomes. This framework should be integrated into the decision-making process for any significant operational change, ensuring that ethical considerations and regulatory compliance are paramount. Regular review and stakeholder engagement are crucial components of this process to ensure ongoing relevance and effectiveness. Question 13. Implementation of a new automated processing system at Tyson Foods is anticipated to significantly increase production output and reduce operational costs. What is the most responsible and comprehensive approach to managing the potential consequences of this technological shift? Option A. Immediately implement the new system to capitalize on projected efficiency gains and address any emerging issues on a case-by-case basis as they arise. Option B. Focus exclusively on retraining and supporting employees who may be displaced by the automation, without a broader evaluation of other potential system impacts. Option C. Conduct a thorough impact assessment that evaluates economic, social, environmental, and operational effects, engaging relevant stakeholders to identify and mitigate potential risks before full implementation. Option D. Prioritize the immediate realization of cost savings and efficiency improvements, assuming that any negative consequences will be manageable through future adjustments. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough impact assessment that evaluates economic, social, environmental, and operational effects, engaging relevant stakeholders to identify and mitigate potential risks before full implementation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in large organizations like Tyson Foods, balancing the need for operational efficiency with the potential for unintended negative consequences on stakeholders. The introduction of a new automated processing system, while promising increased output, carries inherent risks. These risks can range from job displacement for existing employees to potential impacts on product quality, or even environmental concerns if not managed properly. The professional challenge lies in proactively identifying, assessing, and mitigating these risks before they materialize, ensuring that the company's strategic goals are met without compromising its ethical obligations or regulatory compliance. This requires a forward-thinking approach that considers all potential ramifications. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive impact assessment. This process systematically identifies potential positive and negative effects of the new system across various dimensions: economic, e.g., cost savings, job impacts; social, e.g., employee morale, community relations; environmental, e.g., waste, energy consumption; and operational, e.g., quality control, safety. By engaging relevant stakeholders, employees, management, potentially community representatives, and utilizing data-driven analysis, this approach allows for informed decision-making. It enables the proactive development of mitigation strategies, such as retraining programs for displaced workers, enhanced quality control protocols, or environmental safeguards. This aligns with best practices in corporate responsibility and risk management, ensuring that the implementation serves the company's long-term interests while being mindful of its broader impact. From a regulatory perspective, depending on the specific nature of the impacts, this assessment can help ensure compliance with various U.S. labor, environmental, and safety regulations by identifying potential noncompliance issues early. Incorrect approaches analysis. Focusing solely on the immediate cost savings and efficiency gains without considering broader implications is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach ignores potential negative externalities, such as increased unemployment, which could lead to social unrest or reputational damage. It also risks overlooking compliance issues related to labor laws or environmental standards that might be triggered by the new system's operation. Prioritizing employee retraining and support without a thorough assessment of the system's overall operational and environmental impacts is also incomplete. While employee welfare is crucial, neglecting other potential risks means the company might still face unforeseen challenges in areas like product quality or environmental compliance, leading to regulatory penalties or operational disruptions. Implementing the system immediately and addressing any issues as they arise is a reactive and irresponsible approach. This strategy courts significant regulatory and ethical risks. It can lead to substantial fines for noncompliance with labor, safety, or environmental regulations, as well as severe damage to the company's reputation. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the well-being of employees and the environment. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a proactive and holistic approach to change management. This involves a structured process of identifying potential impacts, engaging with all relevant stakeholders, and developing comprehensive mitigation plans. The decision-making framework should prioritize risk assessment and management, ensuring that all potential consequences, both positive and negative, are thoroughly evaluated. This includes consulting relevant U.S. federal and state regulations pertaining to labor, environmental protection, and workplace safety to ensure that the proposed changes are compliant, and that potential risks are adequately addressed. A commitment to ethical conduct and corporate social responsibility should guide every step of the process, ensuring that business objectives are pursued in a manner that benefits, or at least does not unduly harm, all stakeholders. Question 14. Quality control measures reveal that a new, more cost-effective packaging material is being considered for a popular line of processed meats. While the new material offers significant savings, there are initial concerns about its potential impact on the product's shelf life and its interaction with the meat's fat content, which could affect product integrity and safety. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with food safety regulations and maintain product quality? Option A. Perform a brief review focusing only on the cost-benefit analysis of the new packaging, with minimal consideration for potential food safety implications. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to evaluate potential food safety hazards, including material migration, changes in barrier properties, and effects on product integrity, and implement necessary control measures before adopting the new packaging. Option C. Proceed with the new packaging immediately to realize cost savings, assuming that standard quality checks will catch any significant issues post-implementation. Option D. Prioritize the aesthetic improvements and marketing advantages of the new packaging, deferring any detailed food safety evaluation until after the product launch. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to evaluate potential food safety hazards, including material migration, changes in barrier properties, and effects on product integrity, and implement necessary control measures before adopting the new packaging. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of how operational changes can have unintended consequences on product safety and compliance. The pressure to maintain production efficiency must be balanced against the absolute requirement to uphold food safety standards, which are heavily regulated. A hasty decision without proper impact assessment could lead to significant regulatory violations, reputational damage, and potential harm to consumers. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment. This aligns with best professional practice and regulatory expectations, such as those outlined by the Food and Drug Administration, FDA in the United States, which mandates that food manufacturers implement hazard analysis and critical control points, HACCP principles. A thorough impact assessment would systematically identify potential hazards introduced or exacerbated by the new packaging, evaluate their severity and likelihood, and determine appropriate control measures. This proactive approach ensures that any new risks are mitigated before they affect product safety, thereby maintaining compliance with regulations like the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the new packaging without any assessment is a direct violation of due diligence and regulatory requirements. It demonstrates a failure to proactively identify and control food safety hazards, which is a cornerstone of FSMA. This approach risks introducing contamination or compromising product integrity, leading to potential recalls and severe penalties. Conducting a superficial review that only considers cost savings without evaluating potential food safety implications is also a significant failure. Regulations require a holistic approach to food safety, not one solely driven by economic factors. This oversight could lead to the introduction of packaging materials that leach harmful chemicals into the food, or packaging that fails to protect the product from microbial contamination, both of which are serious regulatory breaches. Focusing solely on the aesthetic appeal of the new packaging without considering its functional impact on food safety is another critical error. While consumer appeal is important, it cannot supersede the fundamental responsibility to ensure the product is safe for consumption. This approach ignores potential issues like compromised seal integrity, increased susceptibility to damage during transport, or interaction between the packaging and the food product, all of which have direct food safety implications and regulatory consequences. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a decision should adopt a risk-based approach. This involves 1. Identifying the change new packaging. 2. Brainstorming potential risks associated with this change, specifically focusing on food safety, e.g., material migration, barrier properties, seal integrity. 3. Evaluating the likelihood and severity of each identified risk. 4. Determining and implementing appropriate control measures to mitigate unacceptable risks. 5. verifying the effectiveness of these control measures. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, compliant, and prioritize consumer safety. Question 15. Operational review demonstrates that Tyson Foods is considering implementing a new, more efficient processing line for a key product. While this promises significant cost savings and increased output, there is a potential for increased wastewater discharge and altered air emissions. Which of the following approaches best addresses the potential environmental implications of this operational change? Option A. Rely on historical environmental data from similar, but not identical, processing lines to estimate potential impacts, assuming current regulations will remain unchanged. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive environmental impact assessment to identify potential risks, develop mitigation strategies, and ensure compliance with all applicable federal and state environmental regulations before full implementation. Option C. Proceed with the implementation of the new processing line to realize cost savings and address any environmental issues that may arise on a reactive basis as they are identified. Option D. Assign the responsibility for assessing environmental impacts solely to the production engineering team, assuming they have sufficient expertise to manage all environmental considerations. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive environmental impact assessment to identify potential risks, develop mitigation strategies, and ensure compliance with all applicable federal and state environmental regulations before full implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing operational efficiency with the potential for unintended environmental consequences. The company must proactively identify and mitigate risks associated with its processes to ensure compliance with environmental regulations and maintain its social license to operate. Careful judgment is needed to select the most effective and responsible approach. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive and forward-looking assessment of potential environmental impacts. This aligns with the principles of environmental stewardship and regulatory compliance, such as those found in the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency (EPA) guidelines and the principles of the National Environmental Policy Act (NEPA), which, while not directly applicable to private companies in the same way as federal agencies, inform best practices for environmental responsibility. A thorough impact assessment allows for the identification of potential issues before they arise, enabling the implementation of preventative measures and the development of mitigation strategies. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of regulatory violations, fines, and reputational damage, while also contributing to sustainable business operations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost savings without considering environmental implications fails to meet regulatory expectations and ethical standards. Such an approach could lead to the release of pollutants, depletion of natural resources, or other environmental harm, potentially resulting in significant fines, legal action, and damage to the company's brand. Ignoring potential environmental impacts is a direct contravention of the spirit, if not the letter, of environmental laws designed to protect public health and the environment. Another incorrect approach that relies on historical data without accounting for changes in operational scale or technology is also professionally unacceptable. Environmental impacts can change significantly with increased production or the introduction of new equipment or processes. Relying on outdated information can lead to an underestimation of current risks and a failure to implement appropriate controls, thereby creating a compliance gap and potential environmental harm. A third incorrect approach that delegates the entire responsibility for environmental impact assessment to a single department without cross-functional oversight risks a narrow perspective and potential oversight of critical interdependencies. Environmental impacts often span multiple operational areas and require input from various departments, including operations, engineering, and legal. A siloed approach can lead to incomplete assessments and ineffective mitigation plans. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of potential environmental risks associated with any proposed operational change or ongoing process. This includes consulting relevant environmental regulations, engaging with environmental experts, conducting thorough impact assessments, developing and implementing mitigation plans, and establishing ongoing monitoring and review mechanisms. A commitment to transparency and continuous improvement in environmental performance is paramount. Question 16. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of potential consequences. When considering the introduction of a new line of plant-based protein products, which approach to assessing the impact of this strategic decision best aligns with regulatory compliance and ethical business practices in the U.S. food industry? Option A. Prioritizing the assessment of market demand and potential profitability, with regulatory compliance being addressed only if specific issues arise during the product launch phase. Option B. Evaluating only the immediate financial implications and operational efficiencies, deferring any consideration of broader environmental or labor impacts to a later stage of product development. Option C. Focusing the impact assessment primarily on the marketing and sales strategies, assuming that operational and regulatory aspects will be managed by the respective departments without proactive evaluation. Option D. Conducting a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes potential effects on food safety protocols, supply chain integrity, environmental sustainability, and labor practices, ensuring alignment with FDA, USDA, and EPA guidelines. The correct answer is D. Conducting a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes potential effects on food safety protocols, supply chain integrity, environmental sustainability, and labor practices, ensuring alignment with FDA, USDA, and EPA guidelines. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Tyson Foods, as a large food producer, operates within a complex regulatory environment governed by agencies like the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA. Impact assessments are crucial for ensuring compliance with food safety regulations, environmental standards, and labor laws. The challenge lies in accurately forecasting the multifaceted consequences of strategic decisions on these areas, especially when considering new product lines or operational changes. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with legal obligations and ethical considerations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it involves a systematic and comprehensive evaluation of potential impacts. This aligns with regulatory expectations for due diligence and proactive risk management. For instance, under the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA, companies are required to implement preventive controls, which necessitates understanding the potential hazards and impacts of any changes. Similarly, environmental impact assessments are often mandated by the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, for certain operational expansions. Ethically, a thorough impact assessment demonstrates a commitment to consumer safety, environmental stewardship, and responsible corporate citizenship. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate financial gains without considering regulatory implications would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to violations of FDA or USDA regulations concerning food labeling, ingredient sourcing, or manufacturing processes, resulting in fines, product recalls, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that neglects potential labor impacts, such as changes in workforce needs or safety protocols, could violate Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA standards, leading to workplace accidents and legal liabilities. Ignoring potential environmental consequences, such as waste disposal or emissions, could contravene EPA regulations, leading to penalties and harm to local communities. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured framework. 1. Identify the strategic decision and its scope. 2. Brainstorm all potential impact areas, e.g., food safety, environmental, labor, consumer, supply chain. 3. For each area, identify relevant U.S. federal and state regulations and guidelines. 4. Assess the likelihood and severity of potential positive and negative impacts. 5. Develop mitigation strategies for negative impacts and enhancement strategies for positive impacts. 6. Document the assessment and proposed actions. 7. Seek internal and, where necessary, external expert review. 8. Integrate findings into the strategic plan and monitor outcomes. Question 17. Investigation of a new potential supplier for a key ingredient reveals that their provided documentation for food safety certifications is incomplete and lacks recent audit reports. The supplier representative assures that their internal processes are robust and meet all necessary standards. What is the most appropriate course of action for Tyson Foods' procurement and quality assurance teams? Option A. Immediately approve the supplier based on the verbal assurance and the partial documentation, prioritizing the need to secure the ingredient supply. Option B. Accept the supplier's self-reported compliance and proceed with onboarding, assuming their internal processes are adequate. Option C. Request comprehensive, verifiable documentation, including all required certifications and recent independent audit reports, and conduct a thorough review before any approval. Option D. Reject the supplier outright due to the incomplete documentation without further inquiry. The correct answer is A. Immediately approve the supplier based on the verbal assurance and the partial documentation, prioritizing the need to secure the ingredient supply. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge centered on ensuring compliance with food safety regulations and ethical sourcing practices within a large food production company like Tyson Foods. The core difficulty lies in balancing the imperative to maintain product quality and consumer trust with the operational pressures of supply chain management and cost-effectiveness. A new supplier's inconsistent documentation raises immediate red flags regarding their adherence to established food safety standards, which are critical for preventing contamination and protecting public health. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented investigation and verification process before integrating the new supplier into the supply chain. This aligns with best professional practice and regulatory requirements, such as those enforced by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, which mandate rigorous supplier qualification and oversight. By demanding complete and verifiable documentation, including certifications and audit reports, Tyson Foods demonstrates a commitment to due diligence, risk mitigation, and upholding its responsibility to consumers. This proactive stance prevents potential product recalls, reputational damage, and legal liabilities. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the supplier based on a verbal assurance or incomplete documentation. This represents a significant regulatory failure, as it bypasses established food safety protocols and due diligence requirements. Ethically, it compromises the company's commitment to providing safe food products. Another incorrect approach would be to accept the supplier's self-reported compliance without independent verification. This also constitutes a regulatory and ethical lapse, as it relies on potentially biased information and fails to establish an objective basis for trust. Such actions could lead to the introduction of contaminated products into the market, posing a direct threat to consumer health and violating the principles of responsible food production. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a systematic risk assessment. This includes identifying potential hazards associated with the supplier's products and processes, evaluating the adequacy of their existing documentation, and determining the necessary steps for verification. When faced with incomplete information, the default professional stance should be to pause, request further clarification and evidence, and conduct independent verification if necessary. This ensures that decisions are data-driven, compliant with regulations, and ethically sound, prioritizing consumer safety and company integrity above all else. Question 18. What factors determine the most effective method for verifying the accuracy of employee timekeeping records at a large food processing facility, ensuring compliance with U.S. labor laws and ethical employment practices? Option A. The practice of disregarding small discrepancies in timekeeping records as inconsequential. Option B. The frequency of automated system alerts for minor deviations from standard shift times. Option C. The extent to which timekeeping data is cross-referenced with production schedules and supervisor logs to identify and investigate anomalies. Option D. The assumption that any deviation from scheduled hours indicates an employee attempting to manipulate their time card. The correct answer is C. The extent to which timekeeping data is cross-referenced with production schedules and supervisor logs to identify and investigate anomalies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing operational efficiency with the ethical imperative of ensuring fair and accurate reporting of employee work hours, particularly in a large-scale food production environment like Tyson Foods. The pressure to maintain high output and meet production targets can create an environment where shortcuts in timekeeping might be considered, even if unintentionally. The complexity arises from the potential for human error, system malfunctions, and the subtle pressures that can influence reporting practices. Ensuring compliance with labor laws, specifically the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, in the U.S., is paramount to avoid significant legal repercussions, back pay claims, and damage to the company's reputation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and systematic review of timekeeping data, focusing on identifying anomalies that could indicate errors or intentional manipulation. This involves cross-referencing time clock data with production schedules, supervisor logs, and potentially even video surveillance where appropriate and legally permissible. This method aligns with the FLSA requirement for accurate record-keeping of all hours worked by non-exempt employees. By focusing on identifying discrepancies and investigating them thoroughly, Tyson Foods demonstrates a commitment to accurate wage payment and compliance, which is a cornerstone of ethical employment practices and legal adherence. This approach fosters a culture of accountability and ensures that employees are compensated fairly for all time spent performing work-related duties. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves solely relying on automated system alerts for timekeeping discrepancies. While automation can be a useful tool, it may not capture all nuances of work hours. For instance, an employee might be present but unable to clock in due to a system glitch, or they might be performing essential pre-shift duties before their official clock-in time. Over-reliance on automated alerts without human oversight can lead to overlooking legitimate work hours or unfairly penalizing employees for system errors. This fails to meet the FLSA standard of ensuring all compensable time is accurately recorded. Another incorrect approach is to assume that any deviation from standard shift times automatically indicates an employee attempting to defraud the company. This approach fosters a climate of distrust and can lead to punitive measures against employees who may have legitimate reasons for working slightly different hours, such as assisting a colleague or completing a critical task. Such an assumption can violate ethical employment principles and potentially lead to disputes over wages. The FLSA requires accurate recording of hours worked, not a presumption of employee misconduct. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss minor discrepancies in timekeeping as insignificant and not worth investigating. Even small, recurring discrepancies can accumulate over time and represent a significant underpayment of wages, leading to potential class action lawsuits and substantial financial penalties. FLSA mandates accurate record-keeping for all hours worked, regardless of their perceived magnitude. Ignoring these discrepancies demonstrates a lack of diligence in ensuring compliance and upholding employee rights. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should adopt a framework that prioritizes accuracy, fairness, and legal compliance. This involves 1. Understanding the specific requirements of the FLSA regarding timekeeping and wage payment. 2. Implementing robust timekeeping systems that are regularly audited and maintained. 3. Establishing clear policies and procedures for reporting work hours, including protocols for handling discrepancies and system errors. 4. Training supervisors and employees on the importance of accurate timekeeping and the consequences of non-compliance. 5. Conducting regular, proactive reviews of timekeeping data, looking for patterns and anomalies that warrant further investigation. 6. Fostering an open communication channel where employees can report timekeeping issues without fear of reprisal. This systematic and investigative approach ensures that operational needs are met while upholding the highest ethical and legal standards. Question 19. When evaluating the appropriate dissemination of findings from an internal investigation into alleged policy violations, which approach best balances legal compliance, ethical considerations, and the protection of sensitive information within Tyson Foods? Option A. Disclose the full investigation report to all Tyson Foods employees to ensure complete transparency. Option B. Share the investigation findings only with the direct supervisor of the individuals involved in the investigation. Option C. Consult with legal counsel and human resources to determine the appropriate level of disclosure based on legal obligations, company policy, and the nature of the findings, involving relevant senior management as needed. Option D. Withhold all information regarding the investigation from everyone within Tyson Foods to prevent any potential negative impact. The correct answer is A. Disclose the full investigation report to all Tyson Foods employees to ensure complete transparency. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge involving the ethical handling of potentially sensitive information within a corporate setting. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for transparency and accountability with the protection of proprietary business strategies and the privacy of individuals involved in internal investigations. A hasty or ill-informed decision could lead to legal repercussions, damage to employee morale, and erosion of trust within the organization. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing interests. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, multi-stakeholder review process that prioritizes legal and ethical compliance. This includes consulting with legal counsel to understand reporting obligations and potential liabilities, engaging with the Human Resources Department to ensure adherence to internal policies and employee rights, and involving relevant senior management to assess the strategic implications of disclosure. This comprehensive approach ensures that any decision regarding the information is made with full awareness of all relevant regulations, ethical considerations, and business impacts, thereby representing best professional practice. It aligns with principles of due diligence and responsible corporate governance. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediate and broad disclosure of the investigation findings to all employees. This fails to respect the confidentiality required during an investigation, potentially jeopardizes the integrity of ongoing or future inquiries, and could violate privacy laws or internal policies regarding employee data. It also risks creating unnecessary panic or misinformation. Another incorrect approach is to completely suppress all information about the investigation, even from relevant internal stakeholders. This can lead to a lack of accountability, foster an environment of distrust, and potentially violate regulatory requirements for reporting certain types of misconduct or breaches. It also prevents the organization from learning from the situation and implementing necessary corrective actions. A third incorrect approach is to disclose the information only to a select group of individuals without a clear, documented rationale or proper authorization. This can be perceived as favoritism or a cover-up, leading to accusations of bias and undermining the credibility of the investigation process. It also bypasses established protocols for information dissemination and risk management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic decision-making framework when faced with such situations. This framework typically involves 1. Identifying the core issue and potential risks. 2. Consulting relevant internal policies and external regulations. 3. Seeking expert advice, legal, HR, compliance. 4. Evaluating different disclosure options based on legal obligations, ethical principles, and business impact. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen course of action. 6. Implementing the decision with clear communication to all necessary parties. Question 20. The assessment process reveals that a production line supervisor has instructed a team member to skip a critical quality inspection step on a batch of products to meet an urgent shipping deadline. The team member is aware that this inspection is a mandatory part of the process to ensure product safety and compliance with internal standards. What is the most appropriate course of action for the team member? Option A. Politely refuse the instruction. Explain the importance of the quality inspection for product safety and regulatory compliance, and request guidance on how to meet the deadline without compromising quality standards. Option B. Discreetly perform a less thorough version of the inspection to save time while still appearing to follow the procedure. Option C. Proceed with the supervisor's instruction to meet the deadline, assuming the supervisor has assessed the risks and is authorized to make such a decision. Option D. Ignore the supervisor's instruction and continue with the full inspection, without informing anyone of the supervisor's request. The correct answer is A. Politely refuse the instruction. Explain the importance of the quality inspection for product safety and regulatory compliance, and request guidance on how to meet the deadline without compromising quality standards. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a scenario where an employee is asked to bypass standard quality control procedures to meet a tight production deadline. This presents a significant professional challenge because it pits the immediate business objective of speed against the fundamental ethical and regulatory obligation to ensure product safety and quality. The pressure to meet deadlines is common in manufacturing, but it must never compromise established protocols designed to protect consumers and maintain the company's reputation. The correct approach, which involves escalating the issue to a supervisor or quality assurance department and refusing to bypass procedures without proper authorization and risk assessment, represents best professional practice. This aligns with regulatory frameworks that mandate adherence to quality standards and safety protocols. Ethically, it demonstrates integrity and a commitment to responsible conduct. By following established channels, the employee ensures that any decision to deviate from procedure is made at a higher level, with a full understanding of potential risks and consequences, and in compliance with relevant regulations. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with bypassing the quality control checks to meet the deadline. This is a direct violation of quality assurance protocols and potentially regulatory requirements designed to prevent contaminated or substandard products from reaching consumers. Such an action could lead to severe consequences, including product recalls, regulatory fines, damage to Tyson Foods' brand reputation, and most importantly, harm to public health. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the request and continue with standard procedures without informing anyone. While this avoids directly violating the instruction, it fails to address the underlying pressure and potential systemic issues that led to the request in the first place, leaving the company vulnerable to future similar situations and potentially missing an opportunity to improve processes. Third incorrect approach would be to attempt to cut corners within the existing procedure without fully bypassing it, hoping to save time. This is still a failure of professional judgment, as it undermines the integrity of the quality control process and carries similar risks to fully bypassing it, as it may not meet the required standards. Professionals facing such a dilemma should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the conflict between the request and established procedures/regulations. 2. Understanding the potential risks and consequences of noncompliance. 3. Escalating the issue through appropriate channels, e.g., supervisor, quality assurance, ethics hotline. 4. Documenting the interaction and the steps taken. 5. Refusing to engage in actions that violate ethical standards or legal requirements. This structured approach ensures that decisions are made responsibly and in alignment with the company's values and legal obligations.